Bienvenidos, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I know we have lots of students, staff, faculty, and community members here. We really appreciate it. My name is Gabriela, and I'm here on behalf of the Latino Alliance. We're a collective of students, staff, and faculty who work to support and enrich PBCC's Hispanic and Latino cultures. And I am here to introduce Laura Benamont. She is a PBCC art faculty, and she will be facilitating a panel with our honored guests.
Thank you. I really want to say what a privilege it is to sit in front of you and have a chance to talk a little bit with these amazing artists. As Gabriela mentioned, I am an active artist in the community and a professor here with the art department. So I've had many encounters with these brilliant artists. But really, it's always in this kind of professional passing, you know, with the joy of encountering another creative soul, the embrace, and then see you soon, yes. And so I really want to thank the Latino Alliance team for giving us this opportunity to really get to know a little more about these artists. I will say both of them are extremely active in the community, exhibiting and supporting their fellow artists wherever possible, always with great enthusiasm and passion. Just briefly, to give you an introduction to Vil Vallejo. He is from a long-time Colorado Springs family, a part of our culinary, cultural history, as well as where he took it with his art. And it will be interesting for us all to learn a little more about how Hours in the Kitchen affected his artwork. Largely self-taught, both of these artists are driven by just an incredible, relentless passion. Something that, despite the challenges of needing to finance one's life, needing to do everything we have to do, or you have to do, bringing up your families, the pull of creating was non-stop and a connecting thread. For Phil, I'm really delighted to say, Phil studied with us for a little while before my time when Mer Shern, who's another extraordinary artist in the community, was chair of the department. Phil took his drawing classes with her. Later on, Phil went to USC Pueblo, where you earned a degree, is that right? Or you?
No, I didn't get to finish school.
Okay, well, it's all wonderful. I mean, what I love is that, and of course we're just in the introductions now, is that you kept going back for more mentorship, more training, at the same time that you had really intense and joyous things to share. I'm just going to read a little bit on his 29th birthday, USC Place. Phil's paper airplane sculpture on campus grounds. Later, the sculpture was registered to the Smithsonian Institute's sculpture in public places. That's quite an impressive honor.
Is this a prize?
He spent 2 years in Phoenix, Arizona. When he returned to Colorado Springs, he began a 20-year career as a professional line clearance person. So really, like, putting that, oh my gosh, that relentless need to create and express on hold so that he could bring up his son. But the art always was present, and we'll learn even more about how it evolved and became really mature, beautiful work. Lupita Carasso, also just so driven by that passion, largely self-taught in a lot of regards, very active, very passionate. You get a sense when you look at Lupita's work that art and family are one. Culture and art are one. There's a seamless flow between the work you produce and the life you live. And that is very evident. We're going to hear a little bit about the training that Lupita has gotten here and there within our community. I wasn't sure, you were born, where were you born?
I was born in San Diego.
In San Diego, so a transplant, but I will tell you as an artist, now a integral part of the art world in Colorado Springs. So, a lengthy introduction, but too much to share. Sorry, went on and on. I do have a list of questions. I'm going to move my stool back so I can look at them a little more as I'm working, as I'm asking. And I wonder if I could, first of all, share with the audience. Visual artists, we are prolific, we are articulate in our visual expression of what we have to say. I can see by all the eyes we're having some problems with the slideshow. But just if you lower your gaze, here's the magic right here. But having to speak in public, this is outside our comfort zone. This is outside our comfort zone. So I really want to thank you all and just let it all, pretend they're not here. We're in the studio.
They're all in the room.
That's it, yeah. So what we've done is we've come up with about 7 questions. I'm going to ask each one of the artists the same questions and probably some follow-ups. We'd ask for lapel mics. We will be passing this back and forth. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me without the mic? Not as well? Okay. So I'm going to start with Phil. Phil? What started you on the path? Do you remember the first time you held something in your hand and created something that communicated visually?
Can you hear me without this? Yeah.
Speak up if you can.
Okay, I guess being when I was young, my grandparents and my mom opened up a restaurant, and I was about 2.5 years old, I think, when they first opened. And yeah, okay. Anyway, so to keep me out of trouble or to keep an eye on me or to keep me safe from doing dumb things around there, they would stick me in a booth, give me crayons or colored paper or color pencils. And so 9, 10 years old, I was still doing that, sitting in the booth waiting for Batman to come on TV. We had a little TV there, but that was my life, it was like something I did and something I liked doing until, I didn't even know it was a thing to be an artist. That was probably the purest art I ever did as an artist at that time. I wish I still had some of those pieces. But no, that's kind of where they put me. And then just kept being creative over the years until I got to junior high. I think that was the first time they took one of my pieces and put it at the Fine Arts Center to represent the school. Because they used to have like these, back then they had the schools all had an art show at the end of the year. They would have like Palmer and the junior high schools and then the high schools art class art, you know, they don't do that anymore. So that was kind of like pats on the back as I was up and coming as an artist. And Greg, I mean, it keeps going. I mean, there's so many stories I can.
You can tell as many stories as you want. That's why we're here, Phil. But I will say the restaurant that his family owned, they still own. It is across the street from the Cottonwood Art Center. And I just want you to imagine being a toddler, being 5, being put in the booth. Everybody's in the kitchen, rushing around the dining room. And I love that. And as we look at this sculpture and just the courage, I love seeing the inspiration. And I want you to imagine the smells in the air, too, as this child starts drawing and then gets some pats on the back at school. Did you want to add a thought to
Just the fact that it's always been a love-hate relationship.
We're going to come back to that. I want to ask you, Lupita, the same question. What started you on the path of being an artist? And any way you want to answer that?
Okay, so I also started drawing, using drawing as a kind of a coping mechanism for the life that I was living. My mother suffers from schizoaffective disorder, and she was raising me as an only parent, and I was an only child. So my world was very strange, and there were a lot of times when my mother would get so sick that she was hospitalized, and I would be sent to live with my family in Michoacan, Mexico, or in Watsonville. And the one thing that I always had was, my ability to live in these other worlds through my drawings. And that was what I did throughout my childhood and my teenage years. I became a very young mother. At 17, I had my first child. And I had, my husband and I were stationed here at Fort Carson, and that marriage didn't last very long, but that was how I ended up here in Colorado Springs, because we were stationed here. And so for a lot of years I was just working. I continued to draw and started dabbling in painting a little bit. But I found that when I was at work, I spent all of my time thinking about things that I wanted to be painting, things I wanted to be creating. I worked at a sculpture studio. I worked at a white metal foundry in Black Forest. And, so I was doing something creative. I wasn't, working in an office or anything like that. I was around other creative individuals, but my mind and my entire existence was filled with things that I would rather be doing. And I got that opportunity once I started taking care of my mother. I brought my mother to live with me when I was 24 because she had been in Mexico off medication for 7 years and was a complete wreck, nearly dead. Her teeth were rotting out of her head, and she was destroying my grandmother's house, living there with her siblings. And so when I brought her, she was in really bad shape. And at first I started taking her to work with me and taking her and Salome, my daughter, my eldest daughter, to work. And I would, it was really difficult. So I had this mentally ill parent and a child, and I'm working, and I'm going back and forth between things. But after a couple of years, I couldn't sustain that anymore, and I had to full-time become her caregiver, stay home, and that was really when things started. I would paint at night, around 2001, 2002 was when I started really painting a lot at night. And after everybody went to bed, I would be up at night until 2 in the morning, and painting, planning out things, writing. So that was how things got started for me.
I just love that, and I love you saying, even as I was in my day job, I was thinking what I wanted to paint. Phil, that wonderful photograph of you dealing with those wires. And by the way, I need to pause here and say a very specific thank you to Salome, who worked hard on this event and who really gave some words and applause and created this brilliant PowerPoint. When I saw that, it was right after a sculpture of his that had that same reaching form and red presence. When you were up on the ladder, just briefly, because I have about 10,000 more questions here, were you thinking about art? How did you feel art in your head as you were doing other stuff? Was it there, or did you put it on hold?
No, I would bring home pieces of wood every day almost. I would see a piece of wood, whether it was the shape or the type of wood that it was, and I would just bring it home thinking that one day I'm going to do something with it. You know, but over the years, you know, I just had this huge pile of wood. A lot of it got put in the fireplace, but I would keep the ones that really were strong for me to work with, or I wanted to turn them into something. I didn't always have the time to do the art, but I always had it in my head what I wanted to do with that piece. As far as the tree trimming, I started as a groundman dragging brush, just like every laborer does. And it wasn't until after a couple of years when they were like trying to develop new tree trimmers because you know it's not a job everybody can do or want to do. It's kind of dangerous, but I think I was addicted to the adrenaline of being up in the tree, and I think it was the idea also of just being able to get to the top of the tree. And I used to pause and look out over the horizons, and that was like my spiritual moments doing the tree work. But the art was always there. I was always bringing home wood.
I love
some
that.
kind of weird shape and then work with it. You know, you can see, you know, I don't know, this piece probably got picked up 15 years ago and it just now got turned into a piece of art about a month ago. Like, oh, this is one of my newer pieces. I didn't know it was going to happen until it happens.
And I love that idea that something lives with you, either physically or in your mind. And something we talk about with our students is there's dramatic inspiration, there's pipe speed. But sometimes it's the sigh of a child or a discoloration on the sidewalk that actually haunts you as an artist, and you must express something with it or about it. Okay, that was question number 1. Okay, I want to ask you, it's a really interesting thing, how one identifies oneself. Do you identify as a Latino, Latinx artist? And together with that, what are the challenges and gifts of wearing that inside your soul, inside your heart, and in this society? Yes, that's one question.
Well, growing up in my family, you know, my grandparents, I lived with them until I was 18 and moved out. And then even until their deaths, we only spoke Spanish. They knew English. They could speak a little English, but it wasn't the way we communicated because we're family. And then just seeing all my cousins or uncles and their successes. Oh, sorry, I had the microphone. Yeah, their successes. Watching my family do different things. You know, they were a lot of them were in the restaurant industry also, but at other restaurants they were either chefs or they were managers of restaurants. And then I had an uncle who was a barber for like 50 years. You know, I used to get my haircuts when I was a kid. family in Guanajuato that I would visit when I was younger, and they would come and visit us, and a lot of them ended up being doctors and lawyers, very successful in Mexico, which is really hard to do. They have very good educations. So I guess being as far as the Latino part growing up, there wasn't very much, I guess back then we used to go once a year. They would have the Fiesta Bonita, where they would bring in the mariachis, and they would have the dancers. And I remember I even danced one time. I was doing a dance. I was part of this club, and we would get up on stage, and I was more nervous then as I am now. But I did it, and I was really proud to be part of that. And the food, just always eating everything, tacos, carne asada, whatever we were cooking, that part. Menudo, I don't know if you know what menudo is. Beef tripe. I remember going to the slaughterhouse with my grandfather to go buy it, because they wouldn't sell it at the stores yet. We used to have to go to the butchers and get it. And it was, I don't know why we ate that, but it was something that we ate. And it was really, we had to clean it. It was a big process of cleaning it. So just growing up in that environment and always speaking Spanish, and yeah, it was an interesting, when I grew up throughout elementary school, I lived in primarily a black neighborhood. So all my friends were black. On the other side of the tracks was the Mexican neighborhoods. And so I didn't get to meet a lot of my Hispanic friends until I got to junior high school. I think it was after we would either get in a fight or an argument or something, or I might have been talking to the wrong girl or something like that, and it would get me in trouble. Or if one of my black friends would get in a fight or argument or a dispute, I was always on their side before I was on the Hispanic person's side, because I didn't know them and they didn't know me, but that's how I kind of grew up with that kind of environment.
Wonderful. And I feel like I stole it. Okay. We're so lucky to be able to talk to Phil, because really what we have here is a picture of Colorado Springs over the course of a lifetime. There's something really important to remember, is that Colorado Springs was so effectively segregated even 27 years ago when I moved here, that I had no idea that people of color lived here. That's how effectively and passively, sort of, it was the reality of Colorado Springs. So that's really a wonderful thing you just brought to our awareness of neighborhood. I know, that's that much. We're gonna have to have another 6. The other thing that I'm hearing from you is that family. Culture was the fabric of family, and family was the fabric of your life, and all of that swirling in. So, of course, that's who you are. Yeah. Same long question from 20 minutes ago. Yeah.
Okay, so identity, I think, for me is
Shout out if you can't hear.
okay. Identity has always been a very difficult thing for me personally. I'm the first person in my family that was born in the United States. My mom kept going back and forth to Tijuana to, buy paletas and be there, trying to get me to be born in Mexico, but it didn't work out that way. And, even though my family was very accepting of me and treated me very much like, I was this very unique little thing in our family, because I'm, biracial. Everybody else is, from Mexico, everybody's Mexican, and I'm part black. And identifying as, how do you identify? My identity was very much tied up with Mexico and Mexican culture, and being a English as a second language child. I went into school only speaking Spanish, and then had to figure out how to get by, learn English. And then I was lucky that at my school, the children that I went to church with, you know, that were all Mexican American children, you know, I felt community there. But as I grew older, I did start to see a lot of difference, even in San Diego, where it's such a diverse community, a diverse city. I started to see that there were, you know, like, I was not the same. And when we would go back to Mexico, my mother and I would always get stopped at the border. I would be separated from my mom. My mom would be accused of stealing me. You know, they would say, "Where did you get this child? This isn't your child." I would be crying in another room, you know, freaked out about how, you know, how long am I gonna be in this room? When are they gonna get me back to my mom? And this would happen almost every single time we crossed the border. And we were crossing the border back and forth all the time because we were, you know, going back and forth to see family. Moving here was a huge culture shock. When I got here in 1994, I felt like a raisin in a bowl of milk. Like there was not, I did not see people, anyone that was like me. And it has changed a lot, you know, but I still, I mean, gosh, you know, even the school that my children attend, and like you see so much of that, like just division, like Laura was talking about, where things don't seem as integrated as what I was accustomed to growing up. I think that that identity of anyone that is an immigrant or comes from immigrant parents, there's this duality within you where you, especially, you know, if you still have connection to family in that other country, it's like you're living two lives. You have this very different culture that is very family oriented, and then I would say the American culture and Americanization and what happens when you are trying to fit in this country is you have to, like, there's an expectation of you to lose part of yourself, to lose part of your culture so that you can fit right in to, you know, everybody else, and don't stick out, and don't, you know, be different, you know. And even though we see ourselves as a very individual society, you know, we believe in rugged individualism, but when you come from a different culture, it's very much about family support and a continuation of family support. I care for my mother. My mother's not in a nursing home the way that many people tell me that I need to put my mother in a nursing home. My mother's not in a nursing home because I watched how my aunt cared for her mother, cared for her father, cared for her brother, and I lived that. That is my lived experience of what my family does. My children, hopefully, will not put me in a nursing home, but you never know, you know, like, they see the life that we live of care for one another. And even, you know, even with my mother being hospitalized and me being shipped off to, you know, my aunts and uncles, I could have ended up in foster care. I could have, you know, things could have been very different for me if it weren't for the way that my family operates. And my family operates that way because that is our culture. That is how it is.
And that's a perfect segue to me asking, what influence has your culture had specifically on your artwork? Talking about your art, and also, I guess the question, have you encountered pigeonholing or resistance to embracing you due to cultural or not? So how has your culture influenced your art? And the other question.
I guess I don't know. I've been doing my art for such a long time, I never really, I actually take from other cultures too. I like African art, I love abstract pop art, so my mentor and best friends still today is a black artist here in town, Floyd Tunson. And yeah, he just kind of took me under his wing and showed me a lot of different perspectives of art and different genres that you can fall into or go into. As far as the Latino, like I said, they stopped doing the Fiesta Bonito in the 90s, I guess, was the last time they did it. They don't really have, it was a big thing. It was like all day they would have like a festival. As a matter of fact, it was at Dorchester Park. And I don't know if you guys remember know where that's at. It's where all the homeless people are now on Nevada, and between Nevada and Tejon. There's like a little homeless community there. That was the main park for a long time where we would have the Hispanic community was in that neighborhood, so that's where they would have that thing. And then it kind of just fizzled out. Most of our customers were not Hispanic. We had a few here and there, but a lot of them were there to almost, in a sad way, to criticize the type of food we were serving, because it wasn't traditional Mexican food. It was, tacos, like Taco Bell, tacos and enchiladas, tostadas, whereas in Mexico you have guisos and you have all these other different types of food, that my grandmother did know how to cook, but she didn't do it because the customers wouldn't understand it, or they, not like now you can get it almost everywhere. You can get all these different cuisines from Mexico, and they're really delicious. But so we kind of Americanized ourselves to fit into the city, and then as an artist, I was always being different. So I couldn't get into a lot of the art galleries here. Most of the art galleries back then were either in there was a few in Manitou. Most of them were in old Colorado City, and so it was hard to get into their galleries because they were doing, Pikes Peak and elks and, the deer running across the water, that kind of stuff. And I was doing, the weird stuff that I do. And so, to be honest with you, to get into a place where I felt like I belonged as an artist, I would have to go to Denver and get into some of the galleries in Denver, the Core Gallery, Empire Gallery. They were very more open to my work and very, and I was actually semi-successful being in their galleries. But it was also very expensive to just be driving back and forth to Denver. So we didn't really have something here. I would just do a body of work and then I'd take it to Denver, and then Pueblo was always like this. The culture back then too was like, Denver was always like 5 years ahead of whatever Colorado Springs was doing culturally, and then Pueblo was like even 5 more years after, because I went to school in Pueblo, and so they were like even 5 years behind Colorado Springs. So it's kind of weird how the different trends or the different sounds of music and the different types of art would not get to us until 5 years after Denver was doing it, which was 10 years after New York was doing it. So it's like that's kind of how the art scene was, and how as an artist you had to kind of follow the trends or find your way to where you would be able to put your work.
Hold that thought, because I want you to come back to that on the next
Sorry,
question.
I jumped your
Yeah,
question.
I love it.
I saw your question list.
Let's see, like pigeonholing and stuff like that.
And so the challenges, you answered brilliantly.
Okay.
It was wonderful, right?
Yeah.
I love it. I also, I'm going to interject here. I love that kind of stratosphere that you created, timeline in terms of movements. There's then the other thing, that there was something wonderful in Colorado Springs about being a contemporary artist because there were so few. So you couldn't get into the traditional gallery scene but you could sort of exalt a unique voice that those who were hungry for it would embrace. And that's kind of an interesting thing. I want to ask you, with the, yeah, so you remember the question.
I hope so. I think that very much like what you were talking about when I got here in '94, and when I started actually showing my work in the early 2000s, I encountered a very similar issue where, you know, the work was very traditional. There wasn't a lot of contemporary work out there or places to show. I had an incident where I walked into a gallery with a portfolio down in Old Colorado City, and I had gone in there before and seen the work that was in there. It looked like they had some space, and I thought, I'm going to take an opportunity here to, you know, ask if they're looking for any other artists to, you know, show their work of. And I had some, you know, very traditional pieces that I thought were traditional. I think there's in the slide there might be a textured landscape that's got like swirly clouds, and you know, it was made with molding paste, and so it was like raised, very like a beautiful piece. I sold all of the pieces that were in that style that I had done, but the gallerist looked at me after they looked at my work, and he gave me this really strange look and said, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "I'm from California, like I'm from San Diego," and they said, "Well, people around here want to see Pikes Peak and aspens and, you know, Indians and cowboys and you know, wildlife and that sort of thing." And I was like, "Okay, well, thank you, you know." And so for me, my first opportunity to show my work was at the Business of Art Center, which is now the Manitou Art Center, the MAC. And I also showed up at Chalk in Denver for the Dia de los Muertos show that they had up there. And it wasn't really until I got a studio at Cottonwood Center for the Arts. And they started kind of taking off with their first Fridays or third Fridays that they were doing back then. Then I started getting a lot of like contact with the arts community. So if I had gone to college and if I had, you know, had a teacher or, you know, people that were in the art community, I would know how to like do any of those things. But I didn't know how to do any of the arty things because I had no, you know, art background. So being at Cottonwood really helped me to get in with the art community and find out like what galleries were doing what, and meeting other artists and instructors and, you know, people. Yes, that's where we met. That is where we met. And so like, you know, Phil across the street from Cottonwood, you know, they have their restaurant and everything, and he had a studio upstairs. So becoming, like, if you're interested in the arts, if you're interested in anything really, the most important thing is to make connections, I think, with people that are in those fields. Because you could be really fantastic at whatever it is that you do, but if you don't have personal connections with people, you know, they always say it's who you know, and it's so true. A lot of opportunities that I've had, I could never have had if people didn't personally know me.
It's a really interesting dynamic, because even if you're shy, you must be fearless in selling yourself as an artist, right? Even if you're shaking in your boots, you kind of have to stand solid, right? Like our two impressive guests here, and just a certain kind of confidence. I'm interested, as your journey as artists emerged, I realize I'm sort of overcompensating by maybe speaking too loud. Am I hurting people's ears? With the thing, should we?
Laura, you need to put your password in.
Did you lose me again? question, how do you define success?
I don't know. I just I think just being happy and having a roof over your head and food on the table. Kids are successful or they're happy and not struggling in life, and I think that's part of the real success in how you look at it. Unless you win the lottery or something, I don't know how that's going to work. But I guess the other thing is also just finding your way, finding your peace, and being able to, like now I'm doing my art more now in my life in my 60s than I was ever able to do it before. Again, Floyd Tunson once told me back when I was getting out of high school, he said, do your art when you can, because there's going to be times in your life that you can't. And so for 20 years I did tree work. And yeah, I dabbled with art, I played around with it, I entered a show here and there about every other year, but mostly focused on becoming a professional arborist, which does take your full attention, because things can go sideways really, really fast in that industry, as far as getting hurt or getting killed or getting someone else hurt or getting someone else killed. So we practice a lot of rescue. We had to take CPR every year, first aid every year. That was part of the requirement of our to maintain our certifications as a line clearance arborist. And I have to emphasize that because not every tree trimmer can be around power lines. You have to be trained to work around power lines. So I kind of was proud of myself for becoming a journeyman and being able to train other up-and-coming tree trimmers. It was kind of a thing. And so I kind of turned that into my art for about the 15 years. The first 5 years was hell. But after that, I started learning and understanding the concept of being an arborist and learning the deciduous trees, learning the genesis names, learning the diseases. So it was an occupation that was very interesting to me, and that's why I took it on.
I keep saying I love that because I do. I love it. And you know, I think that when we're real young, we have visions of success. I'm going to be a gallery owner in Manhattan. I'm going to be right famous. And then as you live your life, you realize two things. One is it is your journey. So you better notice where you can embrace this that you didn't even realize you could be passionate about, which is part of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And
It's kind of a full circle story for me.
right?
You know, because I did do a lot of other. I worked at Honeywell. I was an inspector at Honeywell for a while. You know, and just all the odd jobs. I was just saying I worked at Honeywell. You know, when Honeywell was here, now it's something else, microchip or something. Yeah, I did that because I had to have a job. You know, but I also would do the best. I would learn my job the best I could, so I could be an asset to the company. You know, so it's just how you focus your talent and your mind on what you're doing at the time that you may not be happy doing what you're doing, but try to make yourself be good at it so you can learn to be happy or learn to make it easy for yourself.
So true.
Yeah.
And you know, I think something really important is just to remember that your life belongs to you, every moment on this planet. And so seek out solutions that will bring more joy into your life if you're not happy with the path it's on. Absolutely. And I love that idea of embrace being the best at whatever it is you do.
Yeah, because it makes it easier.
How has, oh, sorry,
No.
yeah. Lupita, how has your definition of success changed over the years?
I think that for me, a lot of it, I think, has to do with learning to push away fear. I have lived a life that is full of fear. And I know that when I started making art and showing professionally, I had a terror about everything inside of me, about the things that I was creating, how I was going to present them, how I was ever going to be able to find, you know, an outlet or a place that would accept my work. But now, and I know that it's easier because of the game success of, you know, having solo shows and knowing other people and people that call on you and say, hey, do you want to be in this show? Do you want to show here? You know, all sorts of opportunities open up when you know people. And I can't emphasize that enough. But I think that it's made things easier for me in a sense of like, I have more confidence in my own voice and my own artistic voice. And what is important now is getting to create, getting to do the things that I'm passionate about on a daily basis. So I have a creative practice that is part of my daily life. I create artwork every day. And it might just be drawings, or it might be gouache, small gouache paintings, or it might be oil painting. And I even keep little like notepads around the house and always have a sketchbook with me. But I found that when I started putting sticky notes around me, that I could just jot down like little stick figures or ideas or whatever it is that I have lots of ideas that are constantly coming. And a lot of the times I would be doing something else and I wouldn't have time to stop and write those things down. And I thought, well, it'll take too much time, but just having something small that is like a placeholder for those ideas, it has made a huge difference in my ability to get out more of what I need to express. So having the confidence in my artistic voice and being able to share that, you know, my experience and knowing, you know, that's knowing what I want to portray, what I want to share with the world, that to me is success. So.
I love it. And I also think that something, you know, as many of you are young people at the beginning of your journeys, whatever those journeys will include, and there are a lot of people who are saying, are you meeting your goals? How are you going to pay your bills? What is, I want you to be successful. You just heard something really beautiful, which is, along the way, take note of every inspiration, every thought, every sidetrack, whether it's in a little journal that you keep on you, a sketch pad, sticky notes in your life, mental sticky notes. Well, they don't work as well for some of us, but you know, that is as sacred as meeting your goal. Tending to hearing your ideas, your thoughts, your inspirations along the way. That is part of the journey. That is part of what success is. So I stopped this on the wrong slide. I thought, as if we can go back one, I would like, two now, one more. If we can stop here, what do you all think of asking each one of the artists to talk a little bit about the artwork that's on the screen, or anything else if they want us to find one? And then I know they really want to hear questions from you all as well. So, what do you think? Is this an okay one to stop at? Okay, terrific. Phil, I'm going to be your holder of the microphone.
Again, this is a piece that is probably, well, there are two separate parts of the trees. The curly part comes from, the curly part at the top comes from the ponderosa pine. bottom part, I believe, is a willow, park willow. They grow in different. Anyway, I lost a lot of memory about my trees, but no, it's just they just kind of fuse together. You don't know what's going to happen until you start hitting that moment of like, okay, now it makes sense, and then you go through the process of sanding, and a lot of times, a lot of this is already there. You just have to bring it out, and then. Yeah, and it was something I put in a show. I can't remember the theme of the show, but there's always some kind of a theme for a show, and it went into that show. But
I have a question specifically about the form.
okay.
I noticed, first of all, it's a really elegant sculpture. And we feel the movement from those legs upward into what becomes increasingly organic energy reaching upward as it thins. But I see a reference to the rocket ship. And I did notice in several of your paintings and prints, rockets and military machinery. And are those sort of political statements?
Some of them are, but no, my stepfather, he married my mom when I was 9 years old. He was in the Air Force. He was stationed at NORAD, and he would always take me to the air shows. And I had a base pass before I was 18. I had like you can go on base with your military card, and I would go there. I had friends that were on base, and we would just go hang out at the airstrip and watch the planes take off, land. And I've always just had a desire to maybe be an aviator or something like that.
And so a connection to the movement.
Yeah, connection to the energy of that, just being able to, it's almost, like a lot of pilots that fly, they like the freedom of being in the air and flying and doing stuff like that. I think that was the inspiration for me.
And that does not surprise me, because I want you all to come up here afterwards. This might look like a piece of wood on a screw, but it's actually a really elegant sculpture, and there's a meticulous attention to the contrast between the wood and the metal here. But Phil put this down and he just spins it out, being very gentle. He spins it around. So I can see that idea of motion, of flight, of movement, of tension between what's solid and what's organic, present
I'm
in.
very inspired by kinetic sculpture. I like pieces that move, or just the kinetic sculptures. If I was more of an engineer, I probably would have had a little motor in there, and it would have been just doing it on its own, but I have to spin it. But no, I've always had when I go to museums or if I go to other artists' work that have movement in their sculpture, it just fascinates me, and I always I gravitate towards those type of pieces.
Wonderful. And kinetic sculpture means sculpture that moves.
Yes.
Thank you,
Oh,
Phil. Amazing.
Yep.
I would give you applause for it, because it's wonderful. Share with us a little bit about this, and if you want to stand up.
No, I'm good. So this piece I did last year for a series of paintings for a show I had at Kreuzer Gallery called Motherhood is Forever. And I am the mother of 7 children, and I am also mothering my own mother at this point in my life. And it seems like to me my entire life is about this nurturing position that I never thought that I would be in. The photographs are of my childhood, me and my mom, and my mom cut up all of the pictures in our photo albums from my childhood. She cut people out of them, she cut, me away from other people. So many things went missing because of her illness and the way that the illness expresses itself. And so I had this stack of pictures, and I happened to just see this pile together. There are 3 different photographs, and I think the piece is called something like memories of the ghost pieces or ghost memories of pieces or something. And it really is like that, you have a memory of what the picture was like before she altered it, and I don't even know where a lot of the rest of those pieces went. They're just gone. So what's left is what she wanted to be left, and the rest is just memory or a ghost sensation or image in my head.
Like losing things in a fire.
Yeah.
Did you all hear that? Like losing things in a fire or something like that? I think so much of the creative process is about reconnecting to something we've lost or amplifying something that can easily disappear in memory and staying with it and really exalting it. Do any of you have questions for these amazing artists?
I have a question.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Is there a way you guys can finish this online? Like, is there a way you can post the link somewhere on the school? I want to continue this. Yes.
So this is being recorded and I think it will be posted either on the Light Guide for HIPS or some of the other venues. So we'll let you all know, definitely. Look for some notice of where you can find the discussion, and hopefully we'll keep talking. Any other questions? Right in front of you, I see somebody right here. Wonderful. Lovely glasses.
Thank you. Louisa, you had a photo of what I assume was like the Virgin Mary in like her like iconic kind of silhouette. Is there a reason why she's standing on a globe?
So the Virgin of Guadalupe and the painting itself, I did after it was pretty immediately after 9/11 and we went to war, and it very much felt like everything had changed, and things felt very hopeless. And I had 2 children, and I was very afraid of their future and what their future, if they would even have a future, what anything would be like for them in the future. So that piece was very much had a lot to do with what was going on in our world, immediately after 9/11, and still today, it's just awful that we're still like here. It seems like nothing has really gotten better. I don't know. I'm wrong, but
Well, I think sometimes an image records a fear. The most important thing I think that artwork can do is cause people to pause for a moment and ask questions. And so when I look at this painting, I can certainly see that record of that moment and the record of the fear. But I also see in your comments this question that we all want to keep asking, which is, how does this relate to the world I live in? How can I impact the world I live in? There's another question. Can you stand up?
Phil, I saw a lot of symbolism with paper airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask like what that means, the meaning behind it.
Oh, I just thought it was a pun on the technology that we put our money into, the money that we put into our military machine. And I just thought it was funny that the Laws rockets were coming out. That was a new thing. That was in the 80s. And I just thought it was funny that it would be funny to see these guys shooting at paper airplanes because, and now we're giving them to Ukraine so they can shoot down real planes. So, the Stinger missiles. But what transpired out of this painting, I was in a classroom painting on this. This critique was coming up the next day, I believe. So I was trying to finish it up. I had a paper airplane in my pocket. Back when I was smoking cigarettes, I went out to the lobby to have a cigarette, and the sculpture teacher came through, noticed that I wasn't in his class where I was supposed to be, and he pulls the paper airplane out and he ridicules me and humiliates me in front of my peers about not being in sculpture class, instead playing with paper airplanes. And the smart ass that I was said, no, I'm thinking about building this out of 30-foot tall out in the middle of nowhere out in the back behind the school, and we had these big prairies, and I just being a funny concept guy that I was, he said, put it on paper, I want to see it. So I actually went out and got some drafting paper, and I did a line, I measured the paper, and I did a scale drawing, 30-foot tall paper airplane in the middle of nowhere, and he loved it, and then we ended up scaling it down, and the Kelly Ducey Foundation was giving out money for sculpture on campus. Somehow I got involved with that, and a year later, they put a paper airplane made out of 1/8-inch steel plate, which I built from scratch and I hired a welder because I didn't know how to weld, so the budget that I got from the Kelly Ducey Foundation paid for the welder, paid for the materials, paid for the welder, and paid for the paint. I painted it myself. I built a booth in the sculpture room, like a clean room booth, and I used that so it wouldn't get dust. I used that to spray paint my paper airplane. And then I had a consultant engineer to help figure out how to put it in the ground, how it was going to be permanently installed. So I had to do research, which direction was the wind blowing all the time. I'd put little flags out there and watch the wind over a period of a few days, and mostly came from the north, so when we placed the airplane in the ground, it was placed at an angle so it would deflect most of the wind instead of being a flat wall, have an angle. That was part of the concept. And then, on my birthday, my 29th birthday, on the 29th of August, they had a big celebration. They unveiled it, and I think one of the television stations was there to record it.
Yeah, I think the sculpture is still there.
It's still there,
I
and
saw
about
it
10 years later, I got a letter from the Smithsonian Institute telling me that they had included it in their sculpture. Sculpture. What is it? United States sculpture, public sculpture list, and it's all around the country. There's all these public sculptures, and they're all on those. And I have a number. There's a number that goes with it, and my name, and then also the engineer that helped me. And then I'm wondering if he might have had something to do with it, because I never talked to him after that. But I'm wondering if he thought that he knew how to make that connection.
You never know. It's always mysterious how some things end up becoming nothing, and other things, all of a sudden, a beautiful thing happens in your career. It's very mysterious. Even I'm almost 60 here.
Would you say it's almost philosophical?
I would say so.
I teach philosophy. I have a question for y'all. I love that story, by the way, from scolding from an instructor, paper airplane, to Smithsonian. No problem, right? No problem.
It's called, the title is Threefold Education. That's the title.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I too was moved by the Madonna figures standing over a world in chaos. I noticed the atomic mushroom cloud as well as the dark fluid. I can't help but think of this blood that's being spilled as a result. So powerful, and yet I'm so encouraged by this work. It moves me deeply. because of how tall the religious figure is in light of the world, and as well as timeless. How you said, here we are again, and we're turning to this again. But and I love the other aspect, the praying hands piece that you painted with the wow. But Phil, you also mentioned spiritual, and that was earlier part of this. So here's my question: How does faith inform your art more? I'd love to hear more from the heart. I see the images, as well as I want to for both of you, and then I'm going to flip it. How does your art, inform or widens your scope of faith? I'd love to hear some more thoughts on that.
Okay.
I hope somebody's getting photos of these two. They're just so amazing.
Okay, so for me, a lot of my early art was influenced by the stories of the saints and martyrs. My mother would read me like really horrific stuff as a very small child about how the martyrs were killed. And so a lot of that, the early paintings, figurative paintings that I did were of saints and martyrs and religious paintings and things like that, and skeletons and skeletons and humans, and almost biblical like stories with skeletons. But after a time, I felt almost like it was like what you were talking about, the pigeonholing. Like this isn't what I want to always be doing. And I more or less, I feel like I just started moving towards expressing my own reality, not so much through how I saw things through the stories of my childhood, but through my own lived experiences. And as I moved away from, like I wasn't involved in the Catholic Church anymore once I moved out here, but when I started taking care of my mom again, when I started taking care of her as an adult, we started attending Mass every single Sunday, and my entire life was like very, what she wanted. Anything to make her happy, anything to try and please her, and eventually I saw that no matter what I did, no amount of baptisms and marriages in the church and rosaries and anything was ever going to be enough to make her happy with me. And the same goes for my family. They very much are, and that's my mom right there in that one, where she's, you see the side eye and stuff. This one here, yes. This is a look that she gets when she's very, very ill, and there's a whole lot of symbolism in that piece. But for me, I think that prayer, when my mom is very sick, she will say things like, I offer every milliliter of water that I drink as an act of love. I offer all of my suffering. I offer every grain of sand that I walk on as an act of love to God. And that is prayer. That, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. The rote prayer, to me, I just never, ever have connected in a way like I do with when I hear my mom, who is in the throes of psychosis, praying these little prayers. My mom would pile fruit and light bulbs and cut people's zippers out of their clothing and make these crazy altars of objects. And when she was well, she told me she was offering the essence of these objects to God as acts of love. So in her mind, somewhere, there is this deep connection to, what her belief system is. But for me, I think more and more over the years, it has become my art. And all of those little lessons of those tiny prayers that my mom prays, for me, the meditation that happens in the artwork, the brush strokes, the molding of clay, all of it is a prayer, is an act of love. Everything, when we cook, when we take care of children, when we treat others with kindness, those are prayers. Those are acts of love, and that is what a prayer is to me, and that is what faith is.
Thanks for saying that.
Wow.
Did you want me to answer?
Yes.
Okay, like Lupita, I was raised also, but I wasn't raised in a Catholic church. I was raised, my grandmother converted to apostolic Christian way before I was born. I think it had to do with the family that took them in when they were stranded here in Colorado Springs. They were on their way to Pueblo. Grandpa and like 3 or 4 kids broke down in Colorado Springs, no money, no nothing. And so the Christian family took him in, found him a place to stay. He went out and got a job right away at the railroad, Rio Grande Railroad. He found a job. Anyway, yeah, thanks. So anyway, so when I was born, I was born into my grandmother's house. So as a young kid, I went to Sunday school. And the church we went to was a Spanish-speaking church. So because that's my grandmother's preference. And, but it was borderline. I mean, when they had revivals, it was kind of scary. They brought everything but the rattlesnakes. But it was like that, people talking, speaking in tongues, people reaching for the Holy Ghost. Plus, the church was really strict on a lot of earthly material things, like the women didn't wear jewelry, men had to always be dressed up nice and neat, and I always had to wear a suit to Sunday school. And I had a little Bible that I still have, that I carried, a little James version. And so I grew up believing in and still believe in God and the life of Jesus. And but I don't go to church. The religion has really disillusioned me because of all of the falsenesses of it. There's so many people that were asking for money on TV, and then the next thing you know, they're having weird things going on in their lives. And the same with my church. As I finally got into my teenage years, I noticed that the preachers that were trying to educate me on Jesus and God and stuff were like backsliders also. They were back doing drugs or doing drinking, or their kids were growing up being, heroin addicts and stuff like that. So it was very disillusional for me to continue on, but I still had faith in the Word of God and growing up as a Christian and understanding the life of Jesus. And so, but I don't preach it to anybody. I'm not one of those people that will sit you down and go, oh, you need to find, I think it's everybody has to find that on their own, in a way, and find their own God. I took philosophy in school, and I also took a religious, Eastern religion, and I thought that was, a lot of friends think that I'm Buddhist because I see inanimate objects as they have a life, or they have, even rocks in my yard, I feel attachment to them, part of my landscape or whatever, but even the trees, I started to understand that trees are living things, and so I always had promised these trees that I cut down or that I trimmed or whatever, that I would make something, bring them back somehow through my art. So that's when I do the wood sculptures. A lot of those are actually pieces, and sometimes I can remember where they came from, even 15, 20 years ago when I cut down this apricot tree or something. It's like I got one big chunk out of it, and it's like one day I'm going to do something, I promise, and so that's kind of how I look at religion in my work, or faith in my work.
You always look over at me a little scared.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
We have a question in the back, right?
Somebody has a question? Yes. Yep, it's working.
Sorry.
and Suzanne, but it might be a wonderful question for Salome,
Yeah, Salome.
who put together the
She
PowerPoint.
did the PowerPoint.
Salome, sorry to put you on the spot.
What made you put these two together is basically what they're asking.
Yeah, and a couple of the juxtapositions. Please stand up as you're talking.
Yes.
For one, it looked good.
It is.
Two, I mean, like, but growing up, that painting everybody seems to like a lot was at the front of the house. So when you hang up your coat, that's the first thing you see. Wonderful, I love it. And Phil's piece here with like the skeleton and the halo and the moon and all of the abstract, like kind of it feels like aggression, like angry strokes. But at the same time, it's like I don't know. I didn't ask you, but it has like that feel to it.
This is actually was a sketch for a larger painting. Did I send you that larger painting of the skeleton?
Yeah, with the
The
stuff.
bigger one?
Yeah.
That one is called.
So this is a sketch.
This was a sketch that I turned into a painting, a smaller painting. But it was a sketch for the bigger painting that I did called Zenith. So I did this one, and I gave this one the opposite of Zenith is Inception. And so that's basically with these two pieces. But the Zenith piece is gone now. It's in I think it's in South Carolina somewhere. But that's how I came up with this. It was just, you get into your self-absorbed artist self, and you think about the things you've been through in life and what you're going to end up doing in life.
When
And
you're
in the
uncomfortable,
end-
then come here.
And in the end, you move on to your next life or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of what this is representing. It's just all of the things that I kind of been through and still going through as a human on this world or earth.
Okay, good. I just want to mention, this painting is kinetic in a lot of its energy, like you expect it to be moving. So I'm not surprised that it's what's going on in your head. Lupita.
So I just wanted to answer a little bit about that, because when Salome and I were putting this together and putting the images together, she had like this big pile on the side of the computer of like pictures, and then we had to like link them up. And it was so interesting, when it was all done, how the pieces marry together. So like Phil's work is so different from mine. I see it as very different, but there was always like this line that carried through with the pieces that made them connect to each other. So whether it be in color, or whether it be in motion, or whether it be in sentiment, like the feeling that the painting was giving off, it seemed really easy actually to put the pieces that went together throughout the entire slideshow. I think there were two that were like, oh, I don't know, we need to find another piece that goes with this. But yes, those two pieces, like I get what you're saying with the whole rebirth and death and life and the maternal aspect of things and the energy. It really all does like go so well together.
So incredible.
Thank you, Salome.
Salome, you want to add something to that?
Well, I just wanted to ask about the two pieces that both of you guys seem to really like, and I don't know how they connect, but I want to.
Can I?
It goes. In the beginning with your uncle, with Tio, and the guavas, and then the other one with the lion.
You should back up to that one piece. Did you see the?
This is the question I have. Like, how do these two connect for both of you guys?
Okay, and I think the lunch is permeating
I get it.
the nostrils, so a short answer.
Short answer. This piece is about, I think we're always been going through the conflict of immigration.
Hold it up.
People coming across the border, the immigration problem that we've had in the years. I've always hated to see people suffer. I guess I can't talk about it. So the baboon is just something, an image that I use, and I've used it a few other times in some paintings that represents for me is just the rage of it's the rage of injustice, and it's also, the baboon is also actually pretty, they're more scared of us than we are of them, but they use that ferocious teeth in their to scare away their potential enemies or predators. So I always use that image as, because they're like ferocious, but really they're actually a docile type of animal. They don't really want to hurt anybody. But they lash out their anger and their fear, by expressing, by making themselves scary. And so I guess that's kind of how I connected those two. It's just, seeing the problem of the world and then lashing out at it and being mad about it.
So when I look at them, I think that the reason that we put the two together was because they were earlier works.
Yeah.
So this is a piece of Phil's earlier work, and this was one of my first paintings. And it's of my uncle packing guayabas in my mother's orchard and in Mexico. And as I see them now, the connections of our culture and family and how people work even into their very elder years to support family in our culture. Your mother is how old? She's 86 and still working her restaurant, and people in my family work well into their 80s and 90s even sometimes. Those are the connections that I see.
What a treat. What a treat. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing another question, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Oh,
I'm
okay.
gonna pick and then I'm gonna give it to you. We'll do it together. Okay. We'll do it together. So, how can Pikes Peak Community College do better to bring innovation, to bring creativity, and to create spaces? What can we do better?
And then my question's a departure, but my question is, you both mentioned family and the nurturing aspect within your art quite a bit. How do you think your roles as parents has affected both your art and the impact on your art because of that impacted you?
I know question number one, how can Pikes Peak do better?
I'm just going to say that it's, very much as in the art community, as artists, we support one another. So when we have shows, we show up for each other. And that is what having a community is all about. So if you want to see community in Pikes Peak Community College, then people need to show up for one another. So my daughter tells me, I joined this club because there were muffins out and I went to go eat a muffin and then I got pulled into this thing. And, so I know that it takes time. It takes time away from my life as a parent of, all these children and taking care of my mom to make time on a Friday night to go and art hop to all these different galleries. But if we don't show up for one another, then we don't have an art community. So I think it's the same for any community, whether it be geology or whether it be philosophy or whether it be, music or whatever.
Do you have ideas? I wonder if you ask the second question. Oh, maybe. I think that those were, that was a perfect answer for us.
Raising children is hard, especially as an artist.
That's the second
That's part of the reason I went back to put art on the back burner. I never gave it up. I just put it on the back burner. I did it when when I could do it, I would do it. Yeah, now I'm proud of my kids. I have my son, he's still trying to figure out what he wants to be when he grows up, but he works and keeps a roof over his head. My daughter I'm very proud of. She's an RN in Arizona, and so I think I felt part of that I encouraged her to be very independent and do what she wanted to do, and she did it, and she's very happy and has a very successful life as a nurse. She's a little stressed because they're shorthanded. You know, we need more nurses in the world, in the country, and so yeah, I'm hoping that she can survive all of that, and maybe one day she might be an educator and teach nursing. You know, and she does art when she can too.
So I would say that the way that my children and being a mother has influenced my art is in everything. I believe that the work that I do would not be what it is if it weren't for the life that I've lived, for the experiences that I've had. And I think that when they say, you know, paint what you know, paint or do what you're passionate about, when you express yourself in your true voice of what your lived experience is, it rings through and it rings true to other people. So it connects. When you are trying to do something that isn't your voice, that is something separate than who you are, there's a disconnect and people can tell because there isn't a soul that's coming through the work. So everything that I do, because it's related to my lived experience as a parent and because of my experience raising my children and who they are, I think that that's why it's impactful to people, even if it's not their lived experience. People can relate to you know, what other people are living or experiencing in different ways. So yeah.
I love that painting, and I want to mention, we mentioned Phil's sculpture. The portrait over there is by Lupita of her husband. Beautiful, beautiful painting. I think it is a perfect moment for us to thank the Latino Alliance, the diversity and inclusion and HIP's leadership and team as well. And most of all, to thank these two extraordinary souls who volunteered to be here.